My name is Clara Hayes, I'm 31 years old, and my family tried to erase me. They thought a text message and a locked gate would be enough to break me, to make me disappear from the world we once shared. They were wrong. Before I tell you how, everything flipped. Like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you are watching from. I'll never forget the text that shattered me. It came on a Tuesday morning, a sterile blue bubble on my phone screen that felt colder than ice. I was in a board meeting presenting quarterly projections when my phone buzzed on the table, a message from my mother. I felt a small, foolish flicker of hope. Maybe she was reaching out. Maybe she had come to her senses. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, the muted sounds of the city humming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I opened the message, and the world tilted on its axis. Clara, given recent events, it's best you don't come to Villa Marisol this summer. The family needs time to heal. My breath caught in my throat. The words were so simple, so clinical, not an ounce of warmth. No apology, no explanation, just a dismissal. The family needs time to heal, as if I were a disease, an infection they needed to quarantine themselves from. They banned me, not Uncle Peter, the man who stole millions of dollars from our family's own charitable foundation, money meant for children's medical research. Not my sister, Felicity, who helped him cook the books and hide the transfers. Not my father, whose willful ignorance allowed it to happen under his nose for years. Me, the one who found the discrepancies, the one who spent months gathering evidence, the one who finally, with a heavy heart, went to the authorities because no one else would. I was the traitor. I was the problem. They closed ranks around the criminal and cast out the person who exposed him. They thought exile would teach me shame. They thought by locking me out of our cherished summer home, they would force me to crawl back, begging for forgiveness for a crime I didn't commit. They had no idea it would teach me ownership. To understand what Villa Marisol meant, you have to understand my family. We were the Hayes family of Miami, a name that carried weight in certain circles. My father, Charles, was a man who built his empire on reputation. He believed a good name was worth more than gold, and he polished ours until it gleamed. My mother, Margaret, was his partner in this endeavor. She was the social architect, a woman who could orchestrate a charity gala with the precision of a military general. Everything was about perception. Everything was about maintaining the flawless facade. Then, there were the children. My older sister, Felicity, was the crown jewel. Beautiful, charming, and socially gifted, she was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. She married well, produced 2 perfect grandchildren, and never, ever rocked the boat. My brother, Andrew, was the affable, easygoing son who followed in my father's footsteps without question. He was loyal to a fault, which meant he was loyal to whoever held the power in the family at any given moment. And then there was me, Clara, the quiet one, the analytical one, the one who didn't fit into the neat box they had built. I didn't have Felicity's social grace or Andrew's blind obedience. I had a mind for numbers and a quiet intensity that they often mistook for disapproval. I became an investment strategist, a job that required me to see patterns, to identify risks, and to look beneath the surface of things. A skill set my family neither understood nor valued. Our lives revolved around 2 pillars, my father's business and Villa Marisol. The villa was a sprawling, whitewashed sanctuary nestled within the exclusive Villa Marisol resort on the coast. It wasn't just a vacation home, it was the heart of our family, the physical embodiment of the Hayes legacy. Every summer of my life had been spent there. I could close my eyes and be there instantly. I could feel the cool terracotta tiles under my bare feet, a relief from the sweltering Florida sun. I could smell the heady mix of salt water and night-blooming jasmine that drifted in from the gardens. I could hear the rhythmic crash of waves against the private shore, a sound that had lulled me to sleep since I was a child. Every corner of that villa held a memory. The sprawling oak tree in the courtyard was where my father taught me how to read, my small legs dangling from a low branch. The enormous kitchen was where my mother, in rare moments of unguarded joy, would teach us her grandmother's recipes, our hands covered in flour. The grand terrace overlooking the ocean was the site of countless family dinners, the sky turning from brilliant orange to deep indigo as we talked and laughed. It was my one safe place, or so I thought. In Miami, I was the odd one out, the daughter who chose spreadsheets over social events. But at the villa, I could just be. I could spend hours on the veranda with a book, feeling the sea breeze on my skin, and for a little while, the weight of not quite belonging would lift. It was the only place where the performance of being a Hayes could fall away, and I could breathe. That sense of safety began to erode long before the text message. It started with my uncle, Peter. He was my mother's younger brother, the charismatic, fun-loving uncle everyone adored. He was a master storyteller, a man who could command a room with a single anecdote. He ran the Hayes Family Foundation, the charitable arm of our family's legacy. It was our proudest achievement, a testament to our supposed generosity. My job made me notice things. I was helping my father with some financial planning, and he asked me to look over the foundation's portfolio as a courtesy. It was supposed to be a simple review, but I found things that didn't make sense. Small things at first. An investment in a shell corporation that didn't pan out. A series of consulting fees paid to a company that seemed to have no employees or physical address. I flagged it for my father. He waved it off. Peter knows what he's doing. Don't trouble yourself with the details, Clara. I tried to let it go, but my professional instincts wouldn't allow it. I did my own digging, late at night, after long days at my own firm. It felt like a betrayal to even look, but something was gnawing at me. The more I looked, the sicker I felt. It wasn't just mismanagement, it was systematic theft. Uncle Peter had been siphoning money from the foundation for over a decade. He had embezzled millions, funneling the money into failed business ventures and a lifestyle far beyond his means. The money meant for pediatric cancer research had paid for his yacht. The funds for underprivileged scholarships had bought his sports cars. The worst part was realizing Felicity knew. I found emails between them. She wasn't an active participant, but she was an accomplice in his cover-up. She helped him create false reports and move money between accounts to hide the shortfalls. She knew, and she said nothing. I felt like I was going to be sick for a week. This wasn't just a financial crime. It was a deep moral rot at the core of my family. I gathered every piece of evidence, every bank statement, every email, every falsified invoice, and I did what I thought was right. I called a family meeting. I didn't go to the police. I went to them first. I laid it all out on the polished mahogany dining table in my parents' Miami home. I expected shock. I expected anger at Peter. I expected gratitude, maybe, for saving the foundation from complete ruin. What I got was a cold, terrifying silence. My father's face grew pale, not with horror at the crime, but with fury at the exposure. My mother began to cry, but her tears weren't for the stolen charity funds. They were for the impending scandal. Felicity stared at me with pure hatred, her mask of perfection cracking. "How could you?" my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to our family?" That was the moment I understood. The crime wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had named it. By speaking the truth, I had threatened the one thing they held sacred, their reputation. I had become the traitor, and that was a sin they would never forgive. The villa, my sanctuary, was about to become the symbol of my exile. The meeting was a disaster. It wasn't a discussion. It was an interrogation, and I was the one on trial. My evidence was dismissed as an overreaction, my concern as a selfish need for drama. "You've always been dramatic, Clara," Felicity said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You see conspiracies everywhere. Peter made some bad investments. It happens." "Bad investments?" I shot back, my hands shaking as I held up a bank statement. "He bought a Maserati with money from a fund meant to build a new hospital wing. How is that a bad investment? It looks like a great investment. For his garage." My father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. "Enough! We will handle this internally. You have done enough damage." "Handle it how?" I pressed, my voice rising. "By letting him pay the money back quietly so no one has to know? The money is gone, Dad. Millions of it. There are laws. There are victims." My mother stood up, her face a mask of weary disappointment. "You don't understand, Clara. Family comes first. Always. You should have come to us, and only us. We would have protected the foundation. We would have protected Peter. He's a criminal," I nearly screamed. "He is your uncle," she cried back, tears streaming down her face. "And you have chosen strangers over your own blood." That was the line they drew in the sand. I had broken the code. In the days that followed, a wall of silence went up. My calls went to voicemail. My texts were left on read. I was a ghost in my own family. I continued with my work, the long hours a welcome distraction, but the silence was a constant, heavy presence. I tried to tell myself it was their shock, their denial. They would come around. They had to. But I knew deep down that they were building a narrative, one where I was the villain. The financial betrayal cut just as deep. For years, I had been the one quietly propping up Villa Marisol. My parents, for all their wealth, were house-rich and cash-poor. My father's pride would never let him admit it, but his investments had soured over the years. The upkeep on the villa was astronomical. Property taxes, maintenance, staff salaries. I loved the place, and I had the means, so I helped. It started 5 years ago, after a hurricane tore through the coast. The damage was extensive. The roof was nearly torn off, and the gardens were decimated. My father was panicking about the cost of repairs, so I stepped in. I wrote a check, a very large one, and told him to consider it an early inheritance payment, or just a gift. I didn't care. I just wanted to save our sanctuary. That became the pattern. 1 year, I covered the property taxes when they were in a bind. Another year, I paid to have the entire electrical system rewired and a new security system installed. I never asked for thanks. I did it because the villa was important to me, and I thought by extension, that meant I was important to the family. Now that generosity was being used as a weapon against me. I heard through a cousin that my father had been complaining about my ungrateful attitude. He conveniently forgot to mention my financial support. To the rest of the family, I was just the difficult daughter who was causing trouble. The final official blow came in the form of my father's phone call, a few days before my mother's text. His voice was cold, devoid of any warmth it once held for me. "Clara," he said, the word clipped and formal. "Your mother and I have discussed it. You've humiliated this family in a way I never thought possible. After you went to the authorities, behind our backs you made your position clear. You are no longer welcome in our affairs." "I went to the authorities because you were going to cover up a felony," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You have put a stain on the Hayes name that will take years to wash out," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Don't bother showing your face at Marisol this summer, or perhaps ever again. We need to present a united front, and you are not part of it." He hung up before I could respond. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. They were already planning their luxurious summer, the one I had helped fund. The family group chat, which I was still inexplicably in, was buzzing with plans. Felicity was coordinating catering for their welcome dinner. Andrew was asking about chartering a boat. They were discussing what wines to stock in the cellar I had paid to have refurbished. They were erasing me. They were meticulously cutting me out of every frame of the family portrait, painting over my existence as if I had never been there. My presence, my adherence to the law and morality, was more offensive to them than my uncle's grand larceny. The message was clear. In the Hayes family, the truth was a far greater crime than the lie. The days after my official banishment were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My family, led by Felicity, seemed determined not just to exclude me, but to make me believe I deserved it. The gaslighting was insidious, a slow poison that made me question my own reality. It started with that smug text from Felicity, sent a week after my father's call. I was sitting in my office, staring at a complex market analysis report, but the words were just swimming on the page. My mind was a loop of angry, hurt voices. My phone buzzed, and my heart leaped. Felicity. Hope, as I was learning, was a stubborn and foolish thing. "Hey," the message began, deceptively casual. "Mom told me you were upset about the summer plans. Don't take it personally. If we're being honest, you always hated the villa anyway." I read the words over and over, each one a small, sharp jab. Hated the villa? I loved that villa more than any of them. I loved its quiet mornings and its stormy nights. I loved its history, its flaws, its soul. What she meant was that I hated the performance. I hated the superficial cocktail parties, the endless posturing, the pressure to be someone I wasn't. I hated the way they all smiled for the camera while making cutting remarks under their breath. Felicity had twisted my introversion, my quiet nature, into a narrative that suited her. Clara was never one of us anyway, so she's not losing anything. I didn't reply. What could I say? Arguing would only feed into her narrative that I was dramatic. Silence was my only defense, but it felt like a surrender. The next blow was more practical, more humiliating. I had left a few personal items at the villa during our last family Christmas. A set of first edition books my grandfather had given me, a box of old photographs, a painting I'd bought in my early 20s, sentimental things. I decided to drive up to the resort and retrieve them. I wouldn't bother the family. I'd just be in and out. I still had my access card. I took the 2-hour drive up the coast, the familiar scenery doing little to soothe my anxiety. When I pulled up to the grand wrought iron gates of the Bella Marisol Resort, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I rolled down my window and swiped my access card. A harsh red light flashed. Access denied. My blood ran cold. I tried again. Same result. The security guard, a man named Marco who had known me since I was a teenager, walked out of his booth, his expression a mixture of pity and discomfort. "Miss Hayes," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry. Your card has been deactivated. I have instructions not to allow you on the property." Instructions? From who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. From your father, Mr. Charles Hayes. The humiliation was absolute. It was one thing to be told over the phone. It was another to be physically barred from a place that felt like home, rejected by a paid employee on my own family's orders. I could see the tip of Villa Marisol's red-tiled roof, over the palm trees so close and yet a world away. I had no choice but to turn my car around. My grandfather's books and my memories held hostage behind those gates. But the ultimate betrayal was financial. It was quiet, and it was vicious. As part of my work with the Hayes Family Foundation, I had a small designated fund, a donor-advised fund, technically, that I contributed to and directed every year. It was my share of the family's philanthropic efforts, and I always directed it to a local arts program for at-risk youth. It was a cause I cared about deeply. One afternoon, I received an automated email from the foundation's administrative office. It was a notification of a change in fund allocation. Confused, I logged into the portal. My fund had been completely drained. The money, my money, had been redirected. The memo line read simply, "To cover unforeseen legal and operational expenses." They were using my own charitable donations to pay for the lawyers to defend my uncle and to manage the public relations crisis I had supposedly created. They were stealing from me, but in a way that was just plausible enough to be denied. It was a move of breathtaking cruelty. I finally understood. This wasn't just an emotional reaction. This was a calculated, strategic campaign to dismantle me. They were cutting me off at every point of contact, emotionally, physically, and financially. They wanted to isolate me so completely that I would be forced to break. They wanted to leave me with nothing, to make me feel so alone that I would have no choice but to come back on my knees and accept their version of the truth. I sat in my apartment that night, the city lights of Miami glittering below, and I felt a profound sense of loss. It wasn't just the villa. It wasn't just the money. They had taken my past, my memories, my identity as a daughter and a sister, and they had twisted it all into something ugly. They had chosen a comfortable lie over a difficult truth. They had chosen their reputation over their daughter. And in doing so, they showed me that I had never really been part of the family at all. I had just been a temporary and now inconvenient guest. For a week, I let the grief wash over me. I let myself feel the full weight of the betrayal. I worked on autopilot, came home to my silent apartment, and let the nights be filled with a hollow ache. I looked at old photographs, at smiling faces from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. There was a picture of me and Felicity as children, building a sandcastle on the beach at Marisol, our arms slung around each other. There was one of my father holding me on his shoulders, both of us laughing. The happy memories were the sharpest cuts of all. Hit rock bottom on a Friday night. I was scrolling through social media, a form of self-torture, and saw a photo my mother had posted. It was the whole family, minus me, having dinner at one of their favorite restaurants in Miami. Uncle Peter was there, smiling broadly, a glass of expensive wine in his hand. The caption read, "Family is everything, sticking together through thick and thin." Something inside me snapped. The grief that had been a suffocating blanket suddenly ignited into a cold, hard flame. It wasn't the wild, chaotic fire of rage. It was a focused, blue-hot point of clarity. The tears stopped, the ache in my chest solidified into something else, resolve. They thought I would break. They thought I would beg for a seat back at their tainted table. They had fundamentally misunderstood who I was. I wasn't the dramatic, emotional creature Felicity painted me as. I was a strategist. And for the first time, I decided to stop reacting to their moves and start planning my own. The next morning, I didn't wallow in bed. I got up, made a strong pot of coffee, and pulled out my laptop. I didn't search for ways to hurt them. I searched for ways to build something for myself, completely separate from them. My first call was to my attorney, Rachel Cole. Rachel wasn't just a lawyer. She was one of the sharpest minds I'd ever met. We'd known each other for years, having worked on opposite sides of a complex merger. She was relentless, brilliant, and had a strict no-nonsense policy that I found incredibly refreshing. Her office was a sleek, minimalist space overlooking Biscayne Bay. It felt like a world away from the suffocating, antique-filled rooms of my parents' home. It was a space of logic, of action. "Clara," she said, getting straight to the point after I laid out the whole sordid story. "From the embezzlement to the deactivated access card, you can fight them on the foundation money. We can probably win, but it will be a long, ugly public battle. Is that what you want?" "No," I said, my voice firm. "I don't want to fight them on their terms. I want to be done with them." "Good," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Because wasting your energy on them is letting them win. What you need is leverage. You need to change the entire game, not just the players." She paused, a thoughtful look on her face. "You mentioned the villa is inside the Bella Marisol Resort. I heard a rumor about that place a few weeks ago." My ears perked up. "What kind of rumor?" "The parent company that owns it, a hospitality group out of New York, is in serious financial trouble, over-leveraged. The pandemic hit them hard. They're quietly looking to offload assets. Bella Marisol is one of them." A wild, audacious idea began to form in my mind. It was so big, so impossible, that I almost laughed. But the more I thought about it, the less impossible it seemed. "Are you saying the resort is for sale?" I asked, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "Potentially," Rachel said, a small smile playing on her lips. She could see where my mind was going. "It wouldn't be cheap, and it would have to be handled with extreme discretion. But if someone came in with a solid, all-cash offer, they could likely acquire the entire property. Every villa, every restaurant, the spa, the private beach, all of it." The strategist in me took over. The part of my brain that sees patterns and opportunities, that builds complex financial models for a living, kicked into high gear. The anger and hurt receded, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about turning their greatest weapon, their symbol of power and exclusion, into my greatest asset. For the next month, I lived and breathed the Bella Marisol acquisition. Rachel and I worked in secret. She handled the legal framework, setting up a holding company to make the purchase anonymously. I handled the numbers. I spent my nights not crying over old photos, but poring over the resort's financials. I analyzed their debt structure, their operating costs, their revenue streams. What I found was a classic case of a beautiful asset being run into the ground by a negligent parent company. The management was bloated, the marketing was outdated, and they were bleeding money on inefficiencies I could fix in my sleep. It wasn't just an emotional play, it was a sound investment, a brilliant one. I started quietly liquidating parts of my portfolio, restructuring my assets to free up the necessary capital. I met with bankers to secure a bridge loan, using my pristine credit and solid investment history as collateral. The process was all-consuming. It was my therapy. Every financial statement I analyzed, every contract I reviewed, was a step away from the victim they tried to make me, and a step toward the woman I was determined to become. The plan was audacious, and the timing had to be perfect. My family was due to arrive at Villa Marisol for their traditional 2-month summer stay on July 1st. I set that date as my deadline. Finally, after weeks of intense negotiations conducted through Rachel, we had a deal. The New York firm, desperate for cash, accepted our offer. On the morning of June 30th, just 24 hours before my family's planned arrival, I sat in Rachel's office. The final paperwork was spread across the table. My hand was steady as I picked up the pen. I thought about the little girl who loved the smell of the salt air. I thought about the teenager who found solace in the sound of the waves. I thought about the woman who had been told she didn't belong. Then I signed my name, and in the quiet scratch of ink on paper, I took back everything they had ever tried to take from me. I wasn't just a guest anymore. I was the owner, and the game had just changed. The signing of the documents was a quiet affair. There were no champagne pops, no triumphant declarations. It was just me, Rachel, and a mountain of paperwork in her quiet, sunlit office. The only sound was the rustle of paper and the scratching of my pen. With each signature, I felt a knot in my chest, one I hadn't even realized I was carrying, begin to loosen. This wasn't just a transaction. It was a transfer of power. The keys to the kingdom weren't being handed to me. I was forging them myself. When the last page was signed, I didn't feel a rush of victory. I felt a profound sense of calm. I had taken their chessboard, the one where they had me in checkmate, and I had flipped it over. Now we were playing a new game, one with my rules. "Congratulations, Clara," Rachel said, a rare, genuine smile on her face. "You are now the sole proprietor of the Bella Marisol Resort and all its assets." My first act as owner was not to gloat, it was to govern. I spent the next few hours in a conference room with the resort's general manager, a man named Arthur Davison. He was a career hotelier in his late 50s, with a weary but professional demeanor. He had clearly been briefed on the change of ownership, but was expecting a soulless corporate entity, not the daughter of one of his most prominent long-term residents. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I kept my tone even and professional. I didn't mention my family. I didn't mention the villa. I spoke about his operational budget, his staffing challenges, his marketing strategy. I pointed out 3 areas of financial inefficiency in the first 20 minutes. His apprehension slowly turned into a cautious respect. "Mr. Davison," I said as we were wrapping up, "there is one immediate directive I need you to carry out. It's a matter of security protocol." "Of course, Ms. Hayes. I need you to contact your head of security. I want the access credentials for every villa on this property, especially Villa Marisol, reset immediately. All existing key cards are to be deactivated, effective immediately. New credentials will be issued only with my direct, personal authorization. There are to be no exceptions." A flicker of understanding crossed his face. He'd worked here long enough to know the family dynamics, to have seen the drama play out from a distance. He knew exactly what this meant. "Consider it done, Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice betraying nothing but professional compliance. My next call was to Marco, the head of security, the man who had been forced to turn me away at the gate. "Marco?" "It's Clara Hayes," I said. There was a moment of surprised silence. "Miss Hayes, how can I help you?" His voice was wary. "I'm calling to inform you that I am the new owner of the resort," I said simply. "Mr. Davison will confirm this with you. I have an order for you. I need you to personally oversee the deactivation of all key cards for Villa Marisol. I trust you'll be discreet." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Then, his voice came back, a hint of admiration in it. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I'll handle it myself." The rest of the day was a blur of calculated action. I walked the grounds, not as a guest nostalgic for her childhood, but as an owner assessing her assets. I saw the peeling paint on the cabanas, the outdated reservation software at the front desk, the uninspired menu at the beachfront restaurant. I saw a dozen opportunities for improvement. My mind, which had been consumed with grief and anger for months, was now sharp and focused, filled with plans and strategies. I made my way to Villa Marisol. I used my new master key, and the door clicked open with a satisfying sound. I stepped inside. It was just as I remembered, yet entirely different. The air was thick with the scent of lemon polish and unopened rooms. The staff had prepared it for my family's arrival. The furniture was gleaming, the beds were made, and a welcome basket of fruit and wine sat on the kitchen counter. A note addressed to the Hayes family propped against it. I walked out onto the grand terrace, the same one where I had been told I was a humiliation to the family name. I leaned against the railing, the sea breeze warm on my face, and looked out at the endless expanse of the ocean. This view had once represented a sense of belonging that had been ripped away from me. Now it represented my own boundless potential. As the afternoon sun began to dip towards the horizon, I took a seat in my new office, the one adjacent to the general manager's. It had a perfect view of the resort's main gate. I didn't have to wait long. Right on schedule, a caravan of 3 gleaming black SUVs rolled up to the entrance. My family had arrived for their summer of healing, ready to relax in the lap of luxury they believed was their birthright. I watched as the first car, my father's Bentley, pulled up to the gate. I saw his hand, adorned with his gold signet ring, reach out the window to swipe his access card. I couldn't see the red light, but I could imagine it. I saw his confusion, the way he tried again. I saw the impatience turn to irritation. I watched as my sister, Felicity, got out of the second car, her face a mask of annoyance, and marched toward the security booth. The show was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was not a member of the cast. I was the director, the Commotion in the lobby below began as a low murmur and escalated quickly into the familiar cadence of my family's indignation. From the mezzanine balcony outside my new office, I had a perfect view. It was like watching a play for which I had written the final shocking act. My father was at the front desk, his voice booming across the cavernous marble-floored space. "There must be some mistake. I am Charles Hayes. My family has been coming to Villa Marisol for 30 years. He was speaking to a young, overwhelmed receptionist who looked like she was about to burst into tears. My mother stood beside him, clutching her pearls, her expression one of utter bewilderment. Felicity was tapping furiously on her phone, no doubt trying to call someone to fix this embarrassing inconvenience. Andrew was trying to calm my father down, a useless gesture he had perfected over a lifetime, and Uncle Peter lingered in the background, looking shiftier than usual, surrounded by a mountain of designer luggage. "Sir, I understand," the receptionist stammered, "but your keycards have been deactivated. The villa is listed as unavailable." "Unavailable?" Felicity scoffed, looking up from her phone. "We own it. What is this nonsense? Who is the new owner of this resort? I want to speak to them right now." That was my cue. I stepped away from the railing and began my descent down the grand curving staircase. The click of my heels on the marble steps was sharp and clear, cutting through my father's blustering. One by one, they turned. I saw their faces as they registered my presence. Confusion first. Then, as I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood before them, the confusion morphed into disbelief and dawning horror. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face, already flushed with anger, darkened to a deep, dangerous red. Felicity's perfectly sculpted mask of contempt faltered, her jaw slackening. "You!" my father spat, the word filled with venom. "What are you doing here? I told you that you were not welcome." "You're right," I said, my voice calm and steady. It didn't even tremble. "You told me I wasn't welcome at Villa Marisol. You banned me from a single villa." I paused, letting my eyes travel over each of their stunned faces before continuing. "So I bought the entire resort." A collective gasp went through the small crowd of onlookers in the lobby. The receptionist's eyes were wide as saucers. My family just stared, their faces drained of all color. It was Felicity who found her voice first. "That's ridiculous," she said, a nervous tremor in her laugh. "You're lying. This is some kind of sick, pathetic joke." "My investments have done very well, Felicity," I said, my gaze locking onto hers. "You would know that if you'd ever bothered to ask about my life instead of just judging it." "Clara, please," my mother whispered, stepping forward. She looked genuinely distressed, but I knew her distress was for the disruption, for the scene we were making. "What are you doing? Think of the family." "I have thought of, the family," I said, my voice hardening slightly as I looked at her. "I thought of the family when I paid the taxes on your villa for 2 years running. I thought of the family when I paid for a new roof after the hurricane. I thought of the family when I begged all of you to address the fact that your brother," I said, gesturing towards a pale-looking Uncle Peter, "stole millions of dollars from a children's charity. This," I swept my arm around the lobby, "is the result of you not thinking of what a family is supposed to be. A group of people built on trust and integrity, not secrets and lies." My father took a threatening step forward. "This is absurd. A childish prank. You can't possibly—" Before he could finish, Mr. Davison, the general manager, appeared at my side as instructed. He held a sleek leather portfolio. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes," he said, his tone impeccably professional. "Welcome to Villa Marisol. As per the policies of the new ownership, all long-term residents are required to sign an updated rental agreement and consent to a standard background check for security purposes." He opened the portfolio and presented the documents. The top page was a strict ethical conduct clause. I had written it myself with Rachel. I took the page and read a key passage aloud, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent lobby. "All guests and residents agree to a commitment to lawful and ethical conduct. The resort maintains a zero-tolerance policy for financial malfeasance, criminal activity, or any behavior that compromises the integrity of the Villa Marisol community." I looked directly at my uncle. "I'm sure you won't have a problem signing that, will you, Uncle Peter?" He looked like he was going to be physically ill. He couldn't meet my gaze. My father stood there, sputtering, utterly defeated. The power he had wielded his entire life, his name, his reputation, his money, was useless here. He was just a guest, and I was the house. The true masterstroke, however, was not the confrontation or the ethics clause, it was what came next. After leaving them to stew in the lobby, grappling with the new reality, I had Mr. Davison deliver my terms. They were not to be homeless, of course. I wasn't that cruel. They were offered accommodations, not the sprawling 5-bedroom villa, Marisol with its private pool and oceanfront view, but 2 standard connecting hotel rooms in the main tower, overlooking the parking lot, at the full, non-negotiable commercial rate, payable by credit card in advance. The fallout was predictable and deeply satisfying to watch from a distance. My father raged. He made calls to his lawyers, to his friends on various boards, trying to find some angle, some loophole to undo what I had done. He found none. The sale was ironclad. His influence, for the first time in his life, had hit a wall it could not break. Felicity resorted to her usual tactics, threats and social blackmail. She cornered me near the spa the next day, her face twisted in an ugly sneer. "You think? You're so clever, don't you? I'm going to ruin you, Clara. I'll tell everyone what you've done. I will destroy your reputation." I just looked at her, a profound sense of pity washing over me. "What reputation, Felicity?" I asked, calmly. "The one you all tried to destroy when you branded me a traitor for telling the truth? You can't burn down a house that's already been reduced to ashes. You have no power over me anymore." She was left speechless, a rare and beautiful sight. My mother tried a different approach. She tried tears and emotional manipulation, catching me in a quiet corridor. "Clara, how could you do this to your own mother? After everything I've done for you, we can't live in those tiny rooms. It's humiliating." "Humiliating is having your daughter's access card deactivated," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "Humiliating is discovering your brother stole from sick children, and your family helped him hide it. A smaller hotel room is an inconvenience. You'll survive." The true poetic justice, however, was reserved for Villa Marisol itself. 2 days later, a formal memo was circulated to all resort guests and staff, and a copy was delivered directly to my family's new, cramped rooms. It announced the new Villa Marisol Healing Retreat program. The villa, the memo explained, was being repurposed. In partnership with several non-profit organizations, it would now serve as a complimentary, luxury retreat for families affected by financial fraud and other white-collar crimes. It would be a place where people whose lives had been shattered by greed and deceit could come to rest, recuperate, and feel safe. The first group of guests, a family whose entire life savings had been wiped out by a Ponzi scheme eerily similar to my uncle's activities, was scheduled to arrive that weekend. That was the moment they truly understood. I hadn't just taken the villa from them. I had given it to their victims. I had taken their most prized symbol of status, exclusivity, and unearned privilege, and I had transformed it into a sanctuary for the very people they and their kind preyed upon. The memo concluded with a final devastating detail. The program was being funded by a new initiative, seeded by a significant donation from the resort's new owner. The initiative was named the Hayes Foundation for Integrity. I had taken their name, the one they accused me of tarnishing, and I had washed it clean, infusing it with a principle they had long since abandoned. My father shouted. My mother wept. Felicity was consumed by a silent, burning rage, but there was nothing they could do. They were trapped in their parking lot view rooms, forced to watch as their beloved villa was prepared for its new, more deserving occupants. I stood on my office balcony and looked toward Villa Marisol. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a sense of rightness, of balance being restored to the universe. This wasn't punishment. It was principle. Villa Marisol, I thought to myself, finally belongs to integrity now. Weeks passed. The Florida summer settled into its rhythm of hot, humid days and sudden, dramatic thunderstorms. The resort thrived under my new management. I was in my element, making changes, improving systems, and slowly but surely turning the struggling property into a profitable, vibrant destination. But the most profound change was happening at Villa Marisol. The first family arrived, a quiet couple with 2 young children. I watched from a discreet distance as they stepped onto the property, their faces filled with a kind of awe and disbelief. The little boy, who had lost the funding for his experimental medical treatments due to the fraud, immediately ran towards the pool, his laughter echoing in the courtyard where my family's strained, formal dinners once took place. I made a point of greeting them, not as a wealthy benefactor, but simply as their host. I showed them around, and when the mother's eyes filled with grateful tears, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that no stock market gain had ever given me. Over the next few weeks, more families came and went. I saw children planting flowers in the garden my mother had been so neurotically protective of. I saw couples holding hands on the terrace, finding a moment of peace amid their turmoil. The villa was no longer a monument to my family's ego. It was alive with genuine joy and healing. My own family remained, trapped in a gilded cage of their own making. Their pride was too great to let them simply pack up and leave in defeat. So they stayed, living like bitter ghosts in their small suites. I would see them sometimes at the public pool or in one of the restaurants. They looked smaller, diminished, stripped of the context that had given them their power. They were no longer the kings and queen of the castle. They were just grumpy, entitled tourists, and no one paid them any mind. The final confrontation, if you could call it that, came one evening. I was sitting in the resort's quiet outdoor cafe, reviewing some plans for a new spa wing. My mother approached my table, her steps hesitant. She looked older, tired. The fight had gone out of her. "Clara," she said, her voice soft. She sat down without waiting for an invitation. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the chirping of crickets and the distant murmur of the ocean. "The gardens at the villa look lovely," she said finally. "Those new flowers, they're beautiful. The children planted them," I replied simply. She nodded, her gaze distant. The anger, the pleading, the manipulation, it was all gone. All that was left was a deep, weary sadness. "Clara," she said, her voice cracking, "can't you forgive us?" I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time without the filter of a daughter's pain or anger. I saw a woman who had built her entire life on a foundation of sand, and now the tide had come in. Her question wasn't about me. It was about her. She wanted absolution. She wanted things to go back to the way they were. And in that moment, I had a revelation. I didn't need to hold on to my anger anymore. It had served its purpose. It had fueled me, propelled me to action. But now, it was just a dead weight. "I already have, Mom," I said, and the words were true. She looked at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You have?" "Yes," I said. I took a sip of my water. "I forgave you the day I realized I didn't need your approval to be whole. I forgave Dad the moment I understood that his definition of honor had nothing to do with mine. I forgave Felicity when I saw that her cruelty comes from a place of deep insecurity." I looked over towards the lights of Villa Marisol, twinkling through the palm trees. "That's why I don't need the villa anymore," I continued. "Holding onto it would have been about you, about proving a point, but giving it away, that was about me, about letting go." I turned back to her. "I don't need Villa Marisol anymore," I repeated softly. "It's theirs now." She didn't fully understand. I knew she couldn't. She was still thinking in terms of property, of ownership, of winners and losers, but I wasn't. My forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. It was the final key that unlocked my own cage. I was free. I left her sitting there and walked away, not looking back, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm sitting on the balcony of my own suite now. It's smaller than the villa, less grand, but the view of the ocean is just the same. The sun is setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. Down below, I can hear the faint sound of children's laughter coming from the direction of Villa Marisol. It's the most beautiful sound in the world. They thought banishment would break me. They thought that by taking away my place in the family, they would leave me with nothing. Instead, they freed me. They forced me to build a foundation of my own, one made of integrity and purpose, not of obligation and pretense. The greatest revenge didn't come from slamming doors in their faces. It came from opening doors for those who truly deserved a place in the sun. It came from taking a symbol of selfish pride and turning it into a beacon of hope. And in that, I found a peace that is deeper and more lasting than any victory. I found myself, she smiles, looking directly at the camera. What would you have done if your family banned you? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice, healing, and the power of quiet revenge.